Okay, today I'm going to talk about a thing that I call the Bogeyman. The Bogeyman is the thing that's got everybody running in fear. And what it is, it's fear itself. Fear in the people all over the world. And it's so obvious to me, so clear, everybody is so used to running in fear, away from insecurities and away from things that they're not sure about. Their imagination's full of fear. Everybody's on the run from something, but they don't really know why. I mean, where do these threats come from? You may have noticed on my website a story about Sitting Bull. And I love this story. There they were, American Indians, in a standoff with some American soldiers, the army. And the army soldiers had backed off to an edge of a woodland and they had their rifles. And because the Indians didn't have rifles, so they had to back off a certain distance. And so there was a standoff. You know, there was more Indians than there were army, but the army had the rifles. And so what you could say is all the Indians had to run away from the reach of the bullets. They were always on the run from the rifles. But there was Sitting Bull. And apparently Sitting Bull shocked everybody on this occasion because he rode across the field, into the middle of the field where the bullets were flying, dismounted, sat in the grass, loaded up his pipe with tobacco, and he lit it, and he started to smoke it as the bullets were flying past. I think the story says a horse got shot, and then somebody came and picked him up and rode away. And what it was, the reason why after maybe 200 years, 150 years, we remember the story is because it's astonishing. He did something that nobody else did. Everybody's running from the bullets, but he stood in the ground and stood up to them. As you know, or you may have heard, this is not a religious message at all, but Jesus in the New Testament said some weird things. And they sound weird because of the way we live, okay? The first thing he said was, you know, why do you worry about money, you know? I mean, why do you worry about money? I mean, even people, when they get more, the money that they were worried about not having, oh dear, we need more money to get money, then they worry about having more money. And how many people are absolutely convinced, if I just had £1 million, I'd be absolutely fine. You know, give me $2 million and we're fine. And they get their £1 million or their $2 million, and then they start looking for the next $2 million or maybe $5 million, you know. What is it that is driving people to have this all the time? I don't know how many people I know in my life who always say, oh, if I only had the car, if I only had the house, and they only had this, and they only had that. They don't know what they're being driven by. And the reason why I know they don't know what they're being driven by is because when they obtain the thing that they thought were going to sort their life out and make them all happy, they need something else. And that's because the bogeyman inside of them is never satisfied. It doesn't matter what you give him, he wants more. And he'll wake up tomorrow complaining and moaning again. Jesus also said, why do you worry about where you shall live? You know? I mean, these seem like crazy questions, don't they? When you think about, we seem to be so used to worrying about things. He said, why do you worry about money? Why do you worry about the clothes that you wear? And he said that a lily in the field neither labours nor spins, and yet is arrayed more beautifully than Solomon ever was in all of his glory. And he seemed to look, and you have to ask yourself, what manner of man was he? That he knew what it was like not to be in any of these fears, not in any of these insecurities. And he's among people who are in insecurity, you know. Must have been an amazing kind of feeling. Let's remember now, he's a man like any man. He was an enlightened man. Enlightenment means that he's come out of the land of the bogeyman, out of the land of fear, out of the fears of the mind. And he's standing in his existence. And from the perspective of existence, he's looking at people around him and he's saying, why are you people worried all the time? When are you going to just trust in life itself? When are you going to stand and know what peace is all about? I don't know whether you remember, there's a story of the rich young ruler. He had a lot of money, young man, and he wanted the peace like we all want it. And he saw Jesus, and he saw in Jesus possibly the answer that he was looking for. And he comes to him and says to him, you know, what must I do to be like you, you know? And Jesus doesn't really know how to explain enlightenment. Nobody really does. You can carry it, and you can be an indicator of it, but it can't be explained. It can only be experienced. So Jesus identifies what's in the young man's way and says, well, why don't you give up all these properties that you own and all this money racketeering that you're up to and follow me. And of course the bogeyman comes and says to the young man, oh my God, you can't do that. You can't give up what you've got. You've got to keep your stuff. You've got to keep it, man. Like this. And Jesus is not worried about stuff. He wasn't attached to anything. So he sits there and he's watching what's going on. And it says that the rich young man went away grieving, walking down the road because he couldn't do it. And that's because he was afraid. Fear drove him to get all of his wealth. And now fear kept him away from enlightenment. So there's Jesus amongst people. Here we are, here I am, amongst people. And there's fear everywhere. And I know what the fear is like. I've suffered it in my life. But you know what? Who's going to go out into the middle of the field, like Sitting Bull, and say, do you know what? There's something wrong with all this. You know, who are the leaders in this world? Who are the ones who are going to set the example? And walk out in the middle of the field where the bullets of the bogeyman are saying, you need more money, and you need a bigger house, and you need a better car, and you need this, you got to get more food, you're panicking, and you don't care who you trample on. You don't care about the poor in the world, you don't care about anything except what the bogeyman inside of you is telling you that you need. When's somebody going to stand up and say, you know what, this is crazy, I've got no peace, all I do is work, I come home and worry. It's crazy. When's somebody going to stand in the field and smoke their pipe and defy the bullets, eh? You're probably watching this and thinking, you can't get away from this. This is the way things are. This is the way society is. Well, it is for most people. But you know, there is another way. It reminds me of the story of two fish in a big glass bowl, and there they are, swimming around. And one of them's a little bit troubled about things, you know. And the older fish, the wiser fish, says, you know what I think it is. And the other fish says, well, what's that then? And he says, I think it's this water. It's the vibration in the water. And the little fish looks at him like that. Water? I mean, what water? And you can see what I mean by this. It's like, we get so used to the environment in which we live, we don't even know what it consists of. We don't know what it's made of. How many people reach old age? And what I mean by old age is an age where they can't change life anymore. Their life is lived, and they can't change the past. They're looking back, and there's a certain reflectiveness that goes on. And they start to see, like, the truth about life. And they start to see something that's quite disappointing, and that is, they spent their life chasing after the wind. They were running from the bogeyman of fear all their life. And they missed what life is really all about. They missed the peace that surpasses all understanding about being, just existing. They spend too much time running, too much time caught up in fears that don't exist, that drive you and drive you. And it's crazy. I like to paint a picture of a valley. It's like as if the whole of the human race lives in a big valley, okay? And it's got all trees and grass all down this lovely big valley. And in the bottom of the valley is a shadow man, big shadow man. And everybody's trying to get away from the shadow man, threatens them all the time. Rah! Threatens them with disaster, threatens them with despair, threatens them with terrible things. And everybody's running from him. Everybody's trying to get higher and higher up the hill. Get as far away. The more money you get, the more stuff you can collect together, the more bank accounts, the more everything you get away. But somehow you also hear that some people, in a strange way, have nothing. Virtually nothing. And yet they've found peace. And you think, well, how can they be that? It's annoying, isn't it? How can they find so much peace? How can they be so okay? And that they haven't really got anything. It's getting on my nerves. I've got to go to work all the time. I have to do all these things, you know. And this other guy's just sitting there and, you know, the other guy's sitting where the bullets are flying. But you know what? He's found a way of evading the bogeyman's bullets. I remember a time in my life when I was being shot at, bang, 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 big time, every day. I'd just come back from America. I've spoken the story before, but I'm going to talk about it in this instance, in this context. And I was being plagued by worry because I had growing teenage daughters, 3 of them. I have a wife and a house. I got a life to live, and you know, the way the world's structured, it's a lot of work. And in a way, I don't mind that. I don't mind kind of doing what I have to do. But I don't like being pushed around by a bogeyman. I don't like being pushed around by worry, wherever it comes from. I don't like that cloud that comes and threatens me. And I just think, well, you know what? Life's fair enough. You got to work at things. But I don't want to be pushed around by worry, you know. Anyway, on this particular day, it's written in my book, actually, if you want to read it in more detail. I call it The Wizard That Never Was. And what happened was a rainy, horrible, muddy morning in the middle of the countryside, and I'd gone out for a walk, and I was fed up with being plagued with letters where, you know, your credit card needs to be paid, and this needs to be, and it just seemed like everything was snapping at me, everything had teeth, and it was trying to get me. And so, in my walk of frustration, I leapt over a farmer's fence, over his gate, into an empty field, tore my trousers on some barbed wire, fell into the mud on the floor. So I had mud on my clothing, I was wet, I had blood flowing down my leg and into my sock, and I just about had enough, and I just went mad, you know. And in those days, this is like 15, 20 years ago, I thought like God and the devil were sort of real, or vaguely real, and but they were outside of me, you know. And I thought, it must be this devil that's trying to get me, you know what I mean? So I went mad, and I said, come on then, I've had enough. It's not enough to threaten me, it's not enough to hide around the back of a tree and whisper at me, it's not enough to be trying to frighten me in the middle of the night, it's not enough, I need to see you, let's have it out, you know? And I went mad. Big confrontation. Come on, come on! All the world's afraid of you. People make Hollywood movies about how scary you are and how evil you are. Well, I'm not scared of you. Come on. Show your face. Let's have it out. And I really thought, my God, part of me went, oh my God, what are you doing? You're going to get struck down by lightning here. You're going to find like smoke coming off the ground and the pair of jeans and the pair of shoes. That's all that's going to be left. And but you know, I couldn't stop. And I was like Sitting Bull, who sat in the field, smoked his pipe. I was running toward the problem. I was running down the valley towards the bogeyman. I was going towards it, and I was saying, you know what? I don't think you can do it, man. You know, I don't think you can take me out. Show me. And then I had this sublime moment. And it was a sublime moment. When everything was quiet, the rain was falling down, I had my arms out like this, come on! And all of a sudden, I realized that even if there was a devil, even if there was a bogeyman, whether it's in me or outside of me, it can't touch me. It can threaten, it can talk, it can suggest, it can get my emotions going, because emotions are so stupid, they kind of believe everything. But it couldn't touch me. And I thought, you know what? And I said it out loud. I said, you know, I realize I'm the one with the power. You can't come and make things happen to me. It's if I believe what you're saying, I'm the one who makes it happen. And then I became the cheekiest little man in the whole wide world. Because I've always kind of believed there's a God, out there somewhere. And I turned to God then and I said, my God, it's the same with you, isn't it? You can't touch me. You've never touched me. You can't change my life. The only thing that happens is if I believe things, I believe them in my heart, and I make them happen. I create everything for myself. I realized on that day that the bogeyman down in the valley, who's got everybody on the run, he hasn't got any power whatsoever. Only the power of suggestion. Only the power of fear. Only the power of herding the sheep. But we have the power. We're the ones who make things happen. And if we believe frightening reports, we'll make those things happen. And that's why people are driven crazy by going through the same cycles over and over again, same problems, because you're generating the same fears and the same stuff all the time. There's a terrible discontent amongst people in the world. And so my message today is an appeal, really. There are people in history, and there are people in our lifetime now, who are starting to wake up to realize that we are destroying each other, and we're destroying this earth, we're destroying the animals, ruining the oceans, and it's all about fear, driven by fear. I went to Auschwitz concentration camp a few years ago. It was a great privilege to go and see that place. And on one part of the tour, you can actually go into the gas chamber where people were actually gassed. This great big room. It's not a very nice place to go, but in a way, you want to try and get it in your head. What was going on here, And somebody at one time made some models of the gas chambers, and part of the model was quite shocking, because when the people were all naked, crammed into these gas chamber, somebody would open a flap in the ceiling and drop these pellets in. It's called Zyklon B. And this Zyklon B would go and hit the floor and spread, and it would come up like this, and people would start to suffocate. It was gassing them. And what would happen was there'd be a mad, terrible panic in the room, and people realize they're going to die. And they'd panic, scrambling all over each other, trying to reach up to get air, to breathe, to live. And every time they opened the doors to bring out the dead, I'm sorry, this is quite a disturbing story, but I'm trying to just use it to make a point. But they used to come and find that the bodies were sort of piled up like this because people were trying to climb to get air, And the reason why I say this is because the world at the moment looks that way. I saw a figure recently that there's 19 people in the world who own as many resources as 3.4 billion people. 19 people have the resources of 3.4 billion people. And it just seems to me that people are frightened by fear. They're driven by fear to get more and more and more and more. And just like the people in the gas chamber, they don't really care who they're trampling upon. They don't really give a damn. They just feel, I can't be, I've got to have this. It's not enough to have just one house. I've got to have 5 houses. I've got to have holiday homes. I've got to do all these things. I'm not saying you shouldn't have nice things. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is there's a bogeyman out there, and he's driving us. He's driving people. And you know what? This is the scary thing, right? The bogeyman isn't outside of you. It's not a shadowy figure in a valley. No. He's right there in your head. He's talking to you. And if you try and defy him, just like when Jesus said to the rich young man, you don't really need all this. Just follow me and I'll show you what peace is all about. There was no bogeyman outside that young man. It was all in his head. And he went away the poorer, possessed by his possessions, trying to get more and more and more. What a miserable existence. So the whole point of this, I just want to tell you this, okay? There are people throughout history, And there are people on the earth today who have gone down the valley. Instead of running up the hills, they've gone back down the valley towards the Bogeyman. And they've sat down in the grass and said, you know what? This is just a fantasy. It's just in my head. I don't think you can pull it off. I don't think you can touch me. And you can't. And that's my message for you today. Somebody has got to sit in the grass with the bullets are flying. Somebody's got to go down the valley. Stop running. Stop being driven by fear. Stop being driven by insecurity. And find peace. The peace that surpasses all understanding and can stand alone without anything being added to it.